that evolution of who I was still plays out today, where like I would consider myself vocationally to still be an artist, but my work is my business. Welcome back to the Priority Report with Scotti, owner and founder of Slow Living Solutions. I am excited to be here and having this second episode with you. As I like to tell my clients, we are not aiming for perfection. We are aiming for 1% better every single day. And so that is what my focus is here. Hopefully our focus together as we are learning and growing with each one of these episodes. So I'm excited to share today's with you. We're going to talk about my background, my personal journey, my credentials, how I got into life crafting, and what uniquely qualifies me to be a mentor for you in this space. So I'm very excited to do that. But first, I just want to give a quick shout out to OV3 Media. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. This episode is brought to you by OV3 Media, your audio storytelling experts. At OV3 Media, we believe that every brand, community, and leader has a story worth telling, and we make sure that it sounds exceptional. From podcast production to sound design, we help creators and businesses deliver content with clarity and purpose. Whether you're launching a new series or leveling up your current platform, OV3 Media provides turnkey solutions tailored to your voice. Discover more at ov3media.com. OV3 Media, because your story matters. Okay, so very excited to get into today's episode. Let's start with sort of my origin story. And then we'll just see where the story takes us, where the journey takes us. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to assume that's most of you, but who knows? My origin story starts in the fine arts. I was an artist before I had my corporate marketing career, before I worked in retail, before I did many of the different phases of my work life. I started off in art as a kid and was showing by the age of 13 in galleries and exhibitions. My stuff has won awards. I was always very involved in things like painting and drawing, a lot of the like traditional practices. And then when I was looking at what I wanted to do from a college and career standpoint, I needed to make choices and we'll circle back around on this concept, but I needed to make choices around how I was going to turn a fine arts career into an employable career. And I was left feeling like there were not a lot of options. I had a lot of people that were touting the idea that all that was out there was like the quote unquote starving artist route. And I knew that I didn't want that for myself. And so I remember being in high school and going to the movies and was watching the credits roll after whatever movie it was that we were seeing and thinking like, oh, I could have one of those jobs. One of those has got to be for me. There's so many of them, like, and film is art and I can do film. And so I took a sharp turn to the left from doing some very traditional practices in the art realm to moving into the film and video space at Syracuse University, where I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts. I love this part of my story and my journey because the thing that my art degree taught me more than anything else, and please like listen in on this one, right? Come with me on this journey, was really generically speaking, like how to critically think. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So to contextualize, I would have a project assigned for a course, and you basically had like one big project for the entirety of the semester that you would work on. There were usually very loose outlines given, and you were sort of taught the basics of how to use whatever technical equipment you'd been provided with. And then it was like, okay, go make some stuff, like go make it awesome and don't F it up. And you'd get to the end of the semester and you needed to defend your work, whatever it happened to be. I had classes where it was narrative. I had classes where it was non-narrative, or it was short form, or it was long form. But the thing that was always the same was that you were going to stand in front of a panel and you were going to have to talk about why you made the decisions that you did and how those decisions impacted the way that your work communicated with its audience. What landed, what didn't land, what made sense at the time, but maybe didn't make sense to your audience. Were you clear about who your audience was? And so like they would get down into like the nitty gritty details. Like, why is this woman wearing a red sweater? Or why did you decide to film this conversation as over-the-shoulder cutbacks? Or why did you choose this particular three-point lighting? Or why did you position the character to say XYZ in this line? And like, what does that say about their own character development? Or like, what were you trying to convey in that? And like, when you've spent so much time, and this is like your baby that you've created now, working on this for the past like 5-6 months, and you bring it forward and they're like, why is her sweater red? And you're like, why is her sweater red? Why is her sweater red? I don't know. Like, and I can joke about it now, but like, these were things that were super important as decisions that that really changed how the audience like perceived what was happening on the screen. And we have that same type of relationship in the real world too, where the decisions that we make, the things that we say, the way in which we curate our lives tells other people a lot about us and shares with people how it is that we think and interact with the world, even on a very intuitive level that we may not recognize is even happening. It's the beauty of self-awareness. We don't always see how we come across to other people. So being able to really learn and like hone that skill of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? How does that convey, like, how does that communicate with other people was super interesting to me. And has sort of been the thread that has carried throughout the course of my career and really just sort of my personal constitution. So when I moved into the next phase of my life where I had finished college and was searching for a job and wanted to climb the ladder and do all the things, you know, the way that I like to think about marketing strategy and really just business strategy in general, it always comes back down to talk to me about what the intended outcome is, talk to me about what your expectations of an outcome are, and what are the steps that you're taking now that you are hypothesizing at the very least are going to get you to your desired outcome. And then how do we measure that along the way? So not everything that we say is taken the way that we want it to be taken. Not everything that we do gets us to the thing that we wanted to have happen because we did it. And so it becomes really important that we can start to see like, okay, what's working, what's not working. Like that's the whole fun of strategy, at least in my opinion, is like, it's sort of like a big science experiment. And it's what I really help my clients with, thinking it through as we work together. So for people who didn't have the education that I did, or weren't in strategic roles in their careers, or aren't in strategic roles in their careers, this is a whole new skill set that it takes a lot of practice to get really good at thinking through before you act, but also taking the time to think through after you've acted about, wow, what did I acted intuitively, and here was what I was expecting, and here's what the outcome actually is. How do I feel about that? Do I like how it turned out? Do I not like how it turned out? How did other people respond to that? Was it positively? Was it negatively? If I'm gonna think about how I could do it better next time, what would I choose to do instead? Just such a useful skill set that I just have loved over the years and love working with other people on. The other piece of this that is really part of my journey, and I think it's true for other people as well, is I had this sort of like identity crisis. I had seen myself as an artist for so long, and then entering the corporate space, no one was going to take me seriously saying that I was an artist. But if I walked into the art world, and I did have an artist residency after college, so I was working as a professional artist. When I would walk in there and talk about wanting a corporate job, I was told I was a sellout. And so I was stuck sitting in this like awkward space of like, can I be an artist and work in corporate? Can both of these things be true at the same time? And then on top of that, the work that I was making as an artist shifted over time. So I had done, as I was telling you, I'd done traditional drawing, painting, etc. early on. I moved into more of the film and video. By the time I was out of school and working as a full-time artist, I was into printmaking and sculpture and unconventional materials and how to use different materials together. And what were those reactions that would happen? Like what could you glue together? What doesn't glue well together? What can you solder? What melts and is toxic? It's a lot of interesting choices were made. And so that evolution of who I was still plays out today, where like I would consider myself vocationally to still be an artist, but my work is my business. My work is the programming that I do. It's the beautiful conversations that I have and the value that I deliver to my clients, which doesn't look anything like a drawing or a painting or sculpture or printmaking, but it's still fueling that creative drive that I have and is always challenging me to hone my skills in critical thinking, always challenging me to like try something different, reinvent myself. And so that's a huge part of who I am, and it's a huge part of what I talk about with my clients. So as they are on their own journeys, we have to start to rediscover, like, who were they before all of the social conditioning? Who were they before like people put constraints on what they could and could not do, even if that person putting the constraints on them was themselves? What do they love? What do they care about? What is meaningful to them? And starting to dig deep on their own critical thinking to figure out like, you've been living with you, but like, let's live with you in a very intentional way. Like, let's think it through. Like, let's put words to it. Let's craft it. Let's craft your story. And so we do things like coming up with your own personal mission statement, the same way that a company has a mission statement, only now it's about you. It's what are your core values? If we were to put those on paper, what are your core values? And then how do those core values manifest? So like, what's the behavior that exhibits that core value? Because you and I could have the same word as our core value, and that could mean something very different to the two of us. So getting specific about how we demonstrate our values is really a way of setting operating principles for ourselves. And then when we think about a mission statement, I think the point of reference that's easy for people to make is like, your company has a mission statement. So you should always have a why, you should always have a how, and you should always have a what. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, I'm alluding to that just a little bit there. So we talk about like from a mission statement perspective, when we're talking about your passion, your power, your purpose, and we're putting that all together. Why do you do what you do? Why does it matter? Why do you care so much about this thing? How do you deliver it? Why, like, how does your magic come to life in the ways in which you choose to interact in this world, which is not always in the professional world, it's in the world at large. You have more than one facet in your identity. And then what is it that you do? Like what is the thing? What's the thing? So being able to start to talk about that is a great way for you to start building a better sense of who you are and how to talk about yourself, which has huge implications for your self-confidence, for your sense of empowerment, for thinking about how you live and operate intentionally in the world. And I think that all of those things are really at the core of what The Living Solutions is about. So as I journeyed on into my corporate career and I started having struggles, as many of you probably are yourselves, I found that my core values, my operating principles, the things that I cared about, were not in alignment with the organizations that I was working for. So I had a lot of really amazing experiences, especially early in my career, that aren't afforded to everybody. Large scale projects with high amounts of responsibility and accountability to action off of, and given by default or otherwise a lot of decision-making power, really led me to have, I pride myself on my integrity and my personal accountability. So for me, it was really important to be very specific about why I was doing what I was doing and being able to justify how I approached each project, so that as I was working with my leadership, they knew where I was coming from and what my intent was. Even if they may not agree with it, we at least had a baseline for discussion around why things were going the way that they were. I found that for me, I did school, I did undergrad, right? And then I went into, I worked in manufacturing operations, and then in marketing manufacturing operations, and then moved into the retail space from there, on the corporate side. And I got my PMP, so my project management certification along the way. So the idea of how to set up a project and execute it is well within my wheelhouse. And then as the projects got bigger, I found that I was struggling with how do I make sure that people across a large organization that are coming from different expertise. So in the retail space, you might have like the buying offices and the planning offices versus your marketing team versus your finance, are all looking at the same sale that's supposed to launch into market, but everybody's perspective about how that fits together and everybody's language around how that fits together and what their motivations are a little bit different. And I had to learn how to become sort of the translator so that I could figure out like what is the North Star that we can all align ourselves to, so that when we're talking about the thing that we're all trying to achieve, that we can all express in a way where it's being communicated in two ways, at least two ways, where others are coming from, or like why they're looking at it the way that they are, so that we could find common ground and build solutions together. And that was like, I love that kind of work, but I also found that that's where like politics, like the rubber meets the road, because different pieces of the organization that exist under different executive leadership are incentivized to have competing priorities. And so trying to find a middle ground was not always possible, or it was very frustrating. And then on top of that, you had cultural dynamics that would not necessarily lend people to be their best selves, shall we say. And so there was also having to figure out like, okay, well, when we come across like differences in how we believe in the concept of leadership, or what leadership looks like, that I personally do not ascribe to micromanagement, and I don't handle it very well being underneath it. I don't think you do either. Most people don't. That was not going to work for me. And other people didn't like my leadership style. I tend to take what's called transformational leadership style. So what transformational leadership in a nutshell is like, I worked with a lot of cross-functional teams. So you had people that sat on one team that reported to a lot of different people. It just happened to be the team that I led, but they all were subject matter experts in something unique unto them. And so, again, my role being to get all of these people to be able to talk to one another and understand one another to accomplish something. It had to be my responsibility to then see, like, how do I get my graphic designer to think constructively and express constructively why they took the information in from the planning team and they are presenting this particular like creative direction from the brief, and how, like, helping them to come up with the words to be able to then say, like, I hear you, I see you, and here is the way in which my expertise apply to this bigger initiative, that then gets passed on to a different team that has to go and execute on the creative strategy that's been that's been developed, and then the people who have to analyze the results of the execution of the creative, and so I loved to give people space to work with one another to try and solve that problem together, versus to dictate, you need to do this and you do this and you do this and you do this. I don't like being in the weeds like that, and I don't like taking away the power of choice that the individual has. And I don't believe that I have all of the right answers. So I think as a leader, it's really important to understand where each of your people are coming from, and to be listening for, hey, when you're explaining your understanding of the strategic brief, here are 3 things that I'm hearing, but I'm not sure if those 3 things that I'm hearing are what was intended by the group that formulated the strategy in the first place. So we have to now bridge that gap and figure out, okay, if the way that you interpreted this and the way that they interpreted this was a little bit different, how do we understand one another and then come up with a, like, door number 3 solution that gets us to, like, oh, okay, so I'm going to change the way that I was thinking about this to better meet the original intention, and so on and so forth. So, my experience in corporate may be different from yours, but my experience was that people were in leadership positions and felt that they either needed to like know everything or control everything, or that there was an order taking expectation by individuals who sat on a team, or an order expectation from me to just do as I was told. And I don't do well with that. I like asking the why. I like getting into the nitty gritty. I want to work the Rubik's Cube, frankly, is what I like to do. If you can follow me on that analogy. Like, I want to turn it around and look at it from 7,000 different angles and then come up with like, here's my recommendation based on what I understand of this. And listen to other people also contribute their Rubik's Cube understanding of something. And that doesn't always go over very well. So, as I moved into higher and higher leadership roles, I found that like, if I was going to really succeed in this order taking, mentally taxing environment, that I was going to have other outlets that would allow me to exercise the creativity that I wasn't getting in my own job. So I started weightlifting. I'd been a yogi for many years, still love yoga. Moved into taking group classes that were more calisthenic oriented, and then moved into powerlifting. And from powerlifting, I moved into bodybuilding. And so you'll see in my stories on Instagram and Facebook, you'll see throughout, I'm sure, the time that you're following me on any platform, or even throughout this podcast, like, I will talk about how much having those extracurriculars has fueled me, not only in the relationships that I've developed, but it's helped me to really rein and hone my skills of discipline and working at things incrementally to get better and better and better every day. In a way where I know and will fully admit to, in my corporate life and my work life, I always felt like I was the underdog needing to justify myself or prove myself, or like get out there and like have the answer, whatever the case may be. I always needed to be right. And I think some of that is because that environment cultivates the idea that things are either right or wrong, good or bad, yes and no, like it's very black and white. I don't really live in a world that operates that way. And so being able to have a space and a place where I could set a target goal and start working at that and see the progress that I was making along the way, in a very like tangible manner with weightlifting, like you get a return on your investment pretty quickly, especially when you're starting, and being able to literally see the weight go up on the bar. Super exciting. But then being able to take that and apply that to my own personal development and be like, okay, this conversation didn't go so well. How can I take a step back and do that differently next time? Okay, this project didn't finish on time. Here's where the things went wrong. How could I have been a better leader, a better communicator? How could I coach my team to do better? Became really like, that's where it was like, let's take this thing that exists over here, this concept of self-improvement, and start applying it in the intangibles. Whether that was like my own self-awareness, whether that was my tone of voice, whether that was how I wrote emails, whether that was like how I showed up every day. I needed to really start getting much more specific, start being much more critically aware of how I was coming off, what I was doing, what was working, taking all of the, again, back to where we started, like back to the critical thinking, taking that critical thinking, that's personal analysis, and then being able to turn around and do it 1% better every day. So, how did I end up in life crafting though? I'm sure is where you're like, can we get, let's wrap it up. Okay, that was a great long ass story. Let's get to the meat of how we got to today. So I was, in 2022, I was working for a global research firm. They're a $9 billion company or something ridiculous like that. And my dad got sick. My dad had pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed in late August, early September of 21, and he passed early January of 22. So I did the only thing that I knew to do, which was to pack up my entire life from DC. I guess I say that liberally. I packed up and like closed up shop in my apartment, put my computer in my book bag, threw my cat in his astronaut backpack, story for every time, threw the cat in an astronaut backpack, loaded up the car with a suitcase and drove across country to go take care of him for the last remaining months of his life. And we'll do a whole episode at some point on grief and how that is such an eye-opener to how we think about the world at large, and our experience of mortality. But I'm gonna just summarize for now and say that like it broke my heart to watch someone who had done so much, in my opinion, who had left such a legacy, at least with me, feel or seem to feel very unfulfilled by their life. And I had to stop and question for myself, am I gonna end up at the end of my life feeling that way? If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, am I good? Like, am I good with how life has gone? Because I don't really want to play the game any other way, frankly. So it became a huge mindset shift. My father was also, and to this day is really the only person whose opinion has ever frankly mattered to me. I just don't invest much in what other people have to say about the matter. But his opinion always mattered, always. And not having him here meant I had to rethink, like, what am I working for? Because if I'm trying to prove myself, or I'm trying to, I'm trying to make somebody proud, or I'm trying to validate my existence, there's no one there to give or not give that feedback anymore. And so when I moved back to DC and had laid him to rest and went back to work, I did what every person who has poorly grieved and who is experiencing the shock and PTSD of that type of an experience does, and just like went about my life. I was like, yeah, so that happened, and now we're gonna move forward. And it turns out that doesn't work so well. Womp, womp, womp. And so given that, I had to really reconsider my life choices and had a bit of an existential life crisis, if I'm being totally honest. Like, it really sucked to be like, I don't know why I'm coming to work anymore. I am miserable. I don't see the value that I'm delivering. I don't understand like what the value add is that this company delivers to like the globe. Like I want to be able to get behind something and like feel like my tiny little piece of the pie is contributing to something bigger, and there was nothing there um, to really speak to. In many ways, it was just watching yet another company try and figure out how to best hit whatever their shareholder promise was for the quarter. And my role with them had already been to help put back together a team that had been blown up by a reorganization and a giant layoff, and help people to move through and find a new way of working after that traumatic experience that they all had. And while they got to keep their jobs, there's always a residual sense of what's the word that I'm looking for? Like survivor's remorse, literally, is the best way to describe it. People go through that even when it's, there's no actual death. And so that's where my background in change started to come in. And I was like, well, okay, I have my project management degree. I have a change management certification. At this point, I'd gone back to grad school and gotten an entire degree in learning and organizational change. So I have a psych degree. If you don't know what learning and organizational change entails, it's part of what has formerly been known as IO, or industrial, basically industrial psychology. So I studied the effects of culture and behavior on organizations and how organizations sort of function as their own little societies, and thus the mental, emotional, social impact that can have at the individual level, as well as at the group level. For me, I was like, okay, I'm burnt out. I love all of this geeky psyche stuff. I have all of this experience. I have changed careers multiple times. And so I was like, why don't I take a beat for a second and think about how could I flip the narrative on its head? Like, if I was going to flip a table, proverbially, and go a different direction. If I don't want to be beholden anymore to the way that organizations treat me, treat others, treat their customers. If I want meaningful work, what does that actually look like for me? And when I recognized that I wanted to do the same kind of work, but I didn't want the red tape of the organization, I was like, well, why don't I go into like private practice? Like, why don't I take what I am trying to do at an individual level with each one of my team members, and instead of trying to do it within the context of the organization, within the corporate sphere, why don't I step out of that and allow people to choose that they want that kind of mentorship, coaching, advisory, assistance, consulting, whatever words you want to use for it, right? Why don't I see if there is appetite for that is outside of the system? And so that's what I did. So that is how Slow Living Solutions came to pass. I was like, F this, and was like, I'm getting out of the system that is very slowly but surely breaking me and isn't serving me, isn't serving the people I want to serve, isn't like, I don't get to do the things that I love doing and that I'm really good at in a way that has meaning for me or for others. So like, let's reinvent, like, let's re-engineer another way to do it. Like, let's reverse engineer a way to do it. Like, let's figure out how, like, that was my aim, was I was like, there's a different way. to work with people that doesn't require me to have to do it in this way that I fundamentally and constitutionally disagree with. And so that's why you and I are sitting here having this podcast conversation right now, because you're still in the system, and you may always be in the system, and that's okay. Like, people got to get their paychecks, and stability is important, and you got other things on your plate that maybe outweigh what it is that you do as a 9 to 5. Those are all conversations that we can have about what those trade-offs look like. But I knew for me, I had to get out. And I think for many of my clients, it's not even that I think, it's that I know because I work with them. For many of them, they aren't necessarily looking to like quit their jobs and start a business or like upend the system or whatever. They are looking for, where do I derive meaning and value? How do I identify my purpose? How do I start to value what I uniquely bring to the table, and then look for opportunities, be that in my personal, my professional, my family, or my community lives, to apply those things that I am super passionate about, that I am, that I'm super good at, that bring me joy, and that I see brings joy for others. So I think that's like, I don't know, that's like, I just get so excited about it, because I'm like, I love my clients. And they come from all walks of life. There are those who are in corporate. I also have a lot of people who come to me from what I consider like the altruistic industries. So teachers, policemen, firemen, nurses, people who are in like social services, like anybody who's serving the general public, who's on the front lines. Like, they are often very driven by things that are purposeful and meaningful, and they feel a deep desire to give and give back to the world around them. And having that much passion about something when can feel a lot like charging up a hill in battle. And so being able to talk through, we don't have to necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, but how to take a step back and reevaluate what good looks like. And so what I mean by that is like, let's reset what the model for success looks like. And I had to do that too, right? Like, working for yourself has different success metrics than working in corporate does. I couldn't still care about a title. It's just me. I couldn't care about salary. Like, I have to care about making my mortgage payment and all the things like any other human being. But like, having a bigger number to tout year over year, or like getting my merit increase or whatever, was not something that could be a motivating factor for me anymore. Like, I have to work for my paycheck. I write my paycheck. So, and I'm okay with that, but it's a different mindset. And so, for me, what success looks like now is very different than how success was defined for me in my previous roles. And I do that for my clients too, is like, how can they dissociate themselves from the way that their company or their social circles translate or define success, and work at how do they themselves want to define success. So it can be a much more rewarding way of living, but it does require some introspection and answering some big questions for yourself, kind of like we talked about earlier in this episode. So gosh, like, what has the result of this decision meant for me? Well, a couple of things happened. I decided to start my own company. I did not leave corporate right away. I stayed in my corporate job for another 6 or 8 months. But I did buy a house, and I went from living in, million people metropolises like the DCs, the New Yorks, the LAs, the Chicagos, to a town of 25,000 people. A lot of people here are transplants that are also escaping the big city. There are also a lot of people who grew up in this area. The walks of life are colorful for being such a small place. But there are a ton of artists and entrepreneurs, and I found my house on during my existential life crisis. I was shopping on Redfin, wishing that I were able to just up and move to Scotland or something, and instead found my house here in the Shenandoah Valley, and came to look at it and was like, oh look, they have mountains, this will do. Geography was obviously not my strong suit. I did not recognize that there were mountains in Virginia. Now I'm very clear on the fact that there are, and they're beautiful and they're amazing. And so I had to start looking at what were the things outside my career that were also meaningful to me. So we talked a lot about career stuff. Outside of that, I talked about my art, my bodybuilding, the gym's really important to me. Health and fitness at large is really important to me. So what I eat is really important. I love me a good farmer's market, which they have here. I like homesteading, which is also very prominent in this area. I like shopping local. I like shopping small. These were all core values to who I am, that I wanted to be able to invest back in my community and make connections with people. And so being here, in the wine country of Virginia, has given me an opportunity to really I get to do outdoor stuff. I went to a waterfall yesterday that's literally right in town. Literally 15 minutes from my house, not even. So I can do any kind of hiking that I want. I have a little yard. I have my dog now, as well as my cat. I live in this beautiful little farmhouse that I get to decorate all the ways that I want. I joked for a really long time that you'd walk into my apartments and it looked like it was farmhouse chic, but then it was lacking the farmhouse, and found the farmhouse, and now it's all coming together. So the writing was on the wall for many years, and we just I just didn't know that it was gonna come to fruition. I get to go hang out at vineyards, and I get to go buy stuff at the local thrift stores, and fun boutiques, and artist studios, and all of those things are super important to who I am as a person and how I wanted to live my life. So, I think sometimes when we are thinking big picture about what fulfillment means, we forget that fulfillment has a lot more to do with living in alignment with the things that you value, and being able to exercise that through your behaviors, your actions, through the things that you surround yourself with. So having a supportive community, being a part of a community, being able to give back to a community in ways that all are meaningful for me, has made my life extremely fulfilling. And I'm so excited to bring you into that world and to help you cultivate something for that for yourself. Because you don't have to do drastic stuff. You don't have to move across the country like me. You don't have to go get lots of degrees like I did. You don't have to you don't have to flip a table and start a whole new family and a whole new life or a whole new career or whatever. It's little things that make a huge difference, even if it's just starting to look at how you are spending your time. Are you spending it on things that matter, or are you spending it on escapism? Are you spending it on relationships that give back to you, or are you spending it on relationships that are draining you? Are you getting to learn more about yourself, or are you feeling stagnant in your personal growth? Those are the things that can make or break your experience of what life has to offer. And so we spend a lot of time at Slow Living Solutions working one-on-one, getting into the nitty-gritty of how do you really discover, put language to the things that matter to you, and then how do you actively bring that to life through the different choices that you make along the way. So hopefully this has been a helpful, meaningful episode. I encourage you to like, to share, to follow, to chat about it with your friends. Put your ideas or thoughts in the comments. I'm okay with having a bit of discourse, if you will. I don't mind dissent. Like, you don't have to agree with everything that I say, or if I've said something that doesn't make sense to you, like, let's get into it. Let's figure it out together. I love having those types of conversations. I think they are, they help me to be better for you. They help me to be better for all the people in my life. Hopefully they do the same for you as well. And I look forward to the next episode with you that is coming up, and talking more about your own hero's journey. So please feel free to reach out, and talk to you soon.